when the world is marching towards serious disaster. No secret. Eyes open. Facts are there. Right in front of you. And there are, of course, efforts to counter it. They vary. And they vary in an interesting way. The most far-reaching efforts to counter the crisis are found in pre-industrial societies, what are called primitive societies, where they don't have the benefit of education. Indigenous societies, tribal societies, First Nations, and so on. And the most strenuous efforts to escalate the threats are in the most advanced, most educated, richest, and most powerful societies. So take the Western Hemisphere. Ecuador, which has a large indigenous population and is an oil producer, is undertaking efforts under the pressure of the indigenous population to get support from Europe, which they surely won't get, to leave the oil in the ground where it ought to be and turn to other forms of growth and development. That's the poor, uneducated, indigenous societies. Bolivia, which has an even bigger indigenous population, is way in the lead internationally doing something about this. Then you go to the other extreme, up north, United States and Canada. They're racing madly to try to get the crisis to be as rapid and as extreme as possible. That's what's called, you read the enthusiastic, euphoric reports about a century of energy independence, which are all over the newspapers, including the financial newspapers, and both political parties agree. It's really a great thing. You want to have 100 years of energy independence by trying to get every drop of fossil fuels out of the ground, including things like Canadian tar sands, which are extremely damaging to the environment, the local and, in fact, global environment. But we got to do that. And the energy independence is totally meaningless. So we have to make sure that crisis is as quick and bad as possible. All of these euphoric discussions don't mention, raise the question, what's the world going to look like in 100 years? It's somebody else's business. Within REC, you don't ask that question. Well, that's the scene that a future historian will see if there is one to look back. And it'll be a pretty striking one. And it's up to us, actually, to decide if that scenario is going to happen. It's very imminent. Thanks. Forefront of trying to do something about it. In fact, even if you look at the United States, most important country, the educated sector and the wealthy sector are pressing, and the political class are pressing policies aimed at destruction. But the general public isn't. The general public tends to more or less accept scientific rationality. That's why you have educational programs of the kind I've talked about to teach balanced education. So one thing that the educated class, us smart guys, should do is maybe listen to other people. Listen to people who don't have our advantages, who seem to understand pretty well what's going on, and let them have a voice in influencing policy. They're disenfranchised, and we have succeeded in demonizing welfare. He loved anecdotes about how rich black women are being driven in their chauffeur limousines to the welfare offices to steal your hard-earned money. Well, who wants that? So we don't want welfare, but we want the things that welfare does. In fact, one of the most interesting examples is foreign aid. Overwhelming majorities are opposed to foreign aid. we're giving everything away to the undeserving poor out there. When people are asked, what do you think, to estimate foreign aid, they give an estimate way higher than it actually is. And when they're asked, what do you think foreign aid ought to be, they give a figure much higher than it is. This is the effect of balanced teaching, the kind of thing that you and I and the rest of us are engaged in. We carry out educational programs which have these effects. But the attitudes of the population themselves are quite different.
Hi. My question is about education. You mentioned that corporates attack on education, and not only you. Actually, in my case, and many of us, we go to school.
You study like a lunatic for a week, and you pass the exam, and the next week you forgot what the course was about. Everybody's had that experience. And that's what's called teaching to test, or race to the top. So make sure that teachers and students can't pursue their own interests and initiative because they got to pass that test that's coming next, national, federal, state test. And you talk to teachers, of course, first of all, it's demeaning, it undermines any sense of dignity and independence a teacher might have, which has its own effect. But it also, take a typical example, giving a talk to some group of teachers a couple of months ago, and one of them came up afterwards, a sixth grade teacher, and described to me how after a class, some little girl came up to her and said, she was really interested in something or other that came up in class, and asked for suggestions as to how to look into it on her own. And the teacher was compelled to tell her, you can't do it. You have to study for that test that's coming up, the administered test. Your future depends on it. The teacher didn't say this, but her future depends on it, because teachers are ranked by how students pass these tests. Their salary depends on it, their job. And it's an organized way to dumb the population down. People who run it don't think that, don't say it, probably don't think it. But you just think your own educational experience, I'm sure you know about. You learn by discovery. If you're at a good university, like say, take my own MIT, nobody pays much attention to tests. They can be used to give information about the gaps in the teaching learning procedure, but that's basically what they're for. The idea is one famous physicist, world famous physicist, who's famous for having told his freshman classes in physics, it doesn't matter what we cover, it matters what you discover. If you discover something, that's important. You've learned about the joy of discovery, how to learn, how to go on for yourself. If you don't cover a lot of things, you can pick it up on your own. It doesn't make any difference. That's education. But the educational system is being directed in the opposite direction. And that's is potentially very harmful.
Thank you very much. From UCD Socialist Worker Student Society. I just have two quick questions. One is kind of similar. One question. Then I won't ask that. I just want to ask then, I suppose you've assumed in your talk quite well that civilization as it at the moment can't survive really existing capitalism. So I just want to ask, what do you think we can do about it in the short term? Is there anything that we as people, as students or as academics or whatever can do to achieve it? Because I don't know if you know, but here in Ireland at the moment we do have quite a weak trade union leadership and even